talked about what we missed was how wonderful Alice is, and we'll send the bio later. Um, she was, in addition, the trustee for the Jackson County Mental Health Tax Levy, League of Women Voters Chair for the Paid Leave Study in 2020, World Citizen of the Year 2015, UN Mayor's Award, United Nations KC Chapter, White House Champion of Change, March 20th, 2012, WDC co-founder of the Women's Equality Coalition 2012, founding member of the Amethyst Place for women and families recovering from drugs and alcohol, and the co-founder of Child Protection Center in Jackson County, Missouri. So please welcome Alice Kitchen.
I know, sorry. Okay. All right, well, good morning. Good morning. The League of Women Voters has been a very strong supporter of the Equal Rights Amendment, the 28th Amendment to the Constitution, and so has the state of Missouri. And just so that you have the evidence, on page 71 is the statement, our position statement, and you can read it in detail. Also, another document that I came upon, and maybe Susan will discuss it, but this is a document, a booklet called Law and Equality, an analysis of the impact of the Equal Rights Amendment in Missouri. And if you look at it, you want to pass these around to people. You can look at the table of contents, and you will see that the authors covered everything from property rights and custodial rights and land and so forth. And it's very comprehensive. So they looked at all the statutes in the state of Missouri, and they analyzed them from the standpoint, when Missouri ratifies the ERA, these are the changes that are needed. Well, the authors were, some of you will know, were Bella Hadley, my rep at the time in the House, Susan Linden, and Esther Myers. So you'll see it in the document. Have any of you testified in Missouri for the Equal Rights Amendment? Raise your hand. All right, we have one person here. Great. So that is a detailed analysis. Now, Arizona did the same thing. I'm on the ERA coalition with Zakiya and the others across the country, League of Women Voters, AAUW, you name it. And Arizona, my friend in Arizona, the lawyers, women lawyers got out and they went through all of the Arizona statutes. They didn't analyze it, they just made the changes ready for ratification. Arizona and Missouri have not ratified the ERA. Why do we need the ERA? Next document. Okay. Jessica Newark came to Kansas City Library many years ago, and she told us what she wrote in her book from an attorney and on coalition. She also did an important thing. She identified the cases that didn't prevail in the Supreme Court. And the reason we need the ERA is that we need the highest level of scrutiny, which would be the standard needed to prevail in cases. The big one, remember Walmart, 1,500 women? It was about wages and overtime and promotion. That hit the Supreme Court. What did they do? Nothing. UPS, United Parcel Service Presidency, did not prevail. Chester Koenig, Gonzalez case, horrific case out of Colorado on domestic violence, and it did not prevail. Although interestingly enough, it went to the international court. It did prevail there, and they reported back what the Justice Department should do, and they did nothing. Okay, Claire McCaskill, our senator, Bettina Hager with the ERA Coalition, and I strategized on how to get our senator then to support the ERA. And then some of us at the local level met with her in her office in Kansas City. She never did sign off. And remember our new senator, Josh Hawley? Well, Josh Hawley, when he was early elected, several of us met with his staff here in Kansas City online, and we had a friendly conversation, but that was it. However, when U.S. Representative Carolyn Maloney had a hearing in the Congress, the House of Representatives, first time we'd had one in a while, and the testimony of the lawyers that the ERA coalition found were very articulate and specific on why we needed and how the law needs to change and what. So in that hearing, on the opposition side, I think there were two opponents, and it was Josh Hawley's wife. She is a constitutional lawyer and on the side of the group that opposes the Equal Rights Amendment. So in Missouri, in my lifetime, I'm familiar with one hearing in 2018. Did anybody go to that one? Well, I did go, and a number of us went out of Jeff City, signed in, you sign in on each side. And before either of us, any of us could get up, two women, one from the East Coast, one from the West Coast, one who does documentary. She popped up. They both went to the table. She started to videotape herself as she testified. And in 2018, she used the word abortion in her testimony. Well, the other woman testified. She got into quoting the Bible. And not anything you do in Missouri with our legislature. Anyway, it went viral. It went all over the country. It was horrific. And we have not had a hearing since that time, and no one was there. They offended both the speaker, Senator, or the chair of the hearing, Senator Jill Shoup, and then offended her because she's Jewish, and the other senator on the Bible issue. It was just horrific. It could have been worse because the rest of us had people from Missouri testifying pro and con, but it got crowded out by that. And so, but on a personal note, in Missouri and in Kansas City in particular, in January, our city council, after 10 years and 3 city councils, passed an ordinance declaring that Kansas City is a city that follows the United Nations Treaty on the Convention to eliminate discrimination in all forms against women and girls in all their diversity. So that was passed unanimously. It finally happened. We'll have a celebration. But what that means is that what we're doing mirrors what 189 other countries across the world are doing, not the United States, in 20 cities, mainly on the East and the West Coast. So that's the good news, and that's what I'm going to leave you with.
Thank you so much, Alice. All right, well, we got started late, but now we're running ahead, so that's all right. Our second speaker is Susan Koenig, and she's with the League of Women Voters Missouri ERA Committee. She's the committee chair. Susan Koenig is a member of the Columbia chapter, and she worked in the drive to make Indiana the 35th state to ratify the ERA in 1977, followed by a successful battle against rescission. She continues to work toward full ratification and inclusion in the U.S. Constitution through letter campaigns to Congress and the president. So we're gonna keep our fingers crossed and we'll be able to hear that this tech will all work. But I'd like to turn it over to Susan.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. I'm Susan Koenig, and I thank you very much for that kind introduction.
Unmute.
Can you hear me? I feel like the commercial. Can you hear me now?
Susan, I don't think they can hear you in in the room, but we can hear you on the Zoom.
Okay. I have my mic
All right, we're not-
turned, it should be on, so.
All right. So if you go up to view. Okay, give us 1 sec, Susan. There you go. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, and then we're gonna mute here. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself and then you can take it away, and I think we got it going.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the kind introduction. I appreciate being on this panel with such distinguished speakers, and it was so good to hear Alice talk about her experiences in Missouri and her good, wonderful leadership. So I think
No, I
what
know.
I want to talk
I'm
about.
sorry, we're not hearing you. I'm so sorry, Susan. Just give us 1 sec. We're not hearing you.
Okay.
She's not muted. No, she's not. There's no, but there's. Are you muted, Susan? You're not muted, are you?
No.
No. Oh, maybe. Can you turn your volume up on this computer? If this is yours? Yeah, I kind of do need the lights. Yeah. Can you flip the lights back on, please?
Jim muted this because,
Well, yeah, it should have been, yeah. Okay, do you mind trying again?
Can you hear me? Is this working?
Yes, it is. Thank you very
Oh.
much for your patience. Take it away.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, and I appreciate the introduction, and I appreciate being on this panel. And thank you, Alice, for the things that you said and for your leadership. What I want to talk about is the road that we've been on. We've been on it for a long time, and we've learned a lot in these years that have passed that will help us as we're figuring out how to continue our path on the road to equality. It's not easy, and it's never been easy. And we can look ahead at all the lawsuits that are swirling in the roadway ahead of us and realize that it's going to be a bit before we reach full equality and a recognition of equality based on sex. So it's been 102 years since Alice Paul and others penned the Equal Rights Amendment, and it's been 53 years since the amendment was sent to the states for ratification. I wasn't around in Alice Paul's time, but I've been here a long time. And when the states first received the amendment for ratification in 1972, I was 1 year out of college. I was in a job. I heard that the Equal Rights Amendment was sent to the states, and I thought, it's about time. We need a statement that men and women are equal in the eyes of the law. And I couldn't think of a more concise, elegant way to say it than the way it was presented in the Equal Rights Amendment. And I thought, this will happen, lickety split, we'll have our amendment. And of course, that did not happen. But after a couple of years, things slowed down. And I learned that Indiana, where I was not ratified. And that felt very personal to me, that my own beloved state was not recognizing my right to be in the work world, to live in the country, to be a full citizen. And that really motivated me. I looked around for a group that was working on ratification in Indiana, and that was easy to find. I right away plugged into a local group of the National Organization for Women, and now was plugged into a statewide coalition along with the League of Women Voters and a bunch of different groups, professional organizations, civic organizations, Catholics for the ERA, housewives for the ERA. I can't even remember all the names of the different groups, but there were dozens operating all over the state. And so if someone threw an event, we all showed up. And when we weren't at events, we were busy with our local legislators. And the flavor was so different from the very partisan feeling everything has right now. In fact, Betty Ford was on the campaign trail for the Equal Rights Amendment. She was very outspoken in favor of the amendment. There's an iconic photograph from that era of Betty Ford, Rosalind Carter, and Lady Bird Johnson. And they're on a stage with Bella Abzug, excuse me, I need a sip of water, celebrating the equality for women and the call for the Equal Rights Amendment. And because of that different feel, when we approached legislators, it was very much, we didn't care what party the legislator was representing. We cared how the legislator felt about the Equal Rights Amendment. Were they supportive? Were they maybe on the fence? There was so much misunderstanding about what it would do. And legislators have big, thick documents that they need to read. And some of them had not read the ERA because they didn't know that it was just such a brief little statement. So as we were lobbying and prodding, we used this little card, and I think you may have some in the room. This card contains the entire text of the Equal Rights Amendment. And that was a very persuasive tool to use with legislators. They would take it and look at it, and maybe they had heard something and they weren't seeing it here. So often they were asking us, well, I've heard this argument. How am I going to tell my constituents? What should I tell them? What do you say about that argument? So it was a lot of, I had the feel of educating and seeing, can we agree on this? Can we agree at least on this? And we were successful in the state. Part of our inspiration was that Alice Paul was still alive when I was campaigning in Indiana. And we talked about her a lot and drew inspiration from the fact that the person who had penned this thing was still out there. She was in nursing care, and she deserved to see this through. And when we ratified in January of 1977, it was so exciting to know that we were going to send this message to Alice Paul that Indiana was the 35th state, only 3 more to go. But sadly, that summer of 1977, Alice Paul passed away. And we celebrated our win in Indiana, but the celebration quickly turned back to business because almost right away, a rescission attempt was formed and organized. And I had moved to a small town where I didn't know very many people, but I thought, oh my gosh, we need to organize a group here. We need to plug into this network around the state of people who are fighting the rescission, just like they fought for ratification. And I found a few people who were interested, and I had a call from Marty, who was in leadership of the local Republican Party. And she was very upset that people were trying to repeal this. And she wanted to fight the rescission, but she didn't want to do it under the auspices of a political party, which I think she meant she didn't want it mistaken for a Democratic move. I don't know. But I told her I don't see it as a political party issue. There are women in all parties and all walks of life, and this is an issue about equality. And so we agreed that we were going to co-chair a committee and get as many people locally as we could and just get to work fighting the rescission. And that's what we did. And people were doing it all over the state. So we traveled to Indianapolis, and we were successful in defeating the rescission. Thank goodness. But it was a very busy time because at the same time, there was a national push to extend the deadline. And we were very involved in that with our state representatives and senators to the United States Congress, and we made trips to Washington. And then the discussion, there was an assumption that we have this deadline, we got to get it pushed back because we think we can get 3 more states. We just need a little more time. And so the ask was for 5-year extension, and that got negotiated and whittled down to a 3-year extension, which passed, right? Was in Washington the day it passed. It was another wonderful day of celebration. But our 3 years came and went, and we all know how that was. It was like almost a slumber for some years, until the strangest thing happened. An amendment was added to the Constitution, and that was kind of a depressing thought that, gee, it should have been us. It should have been the Equal Rights Amendment. But let's look at this. What did they do? What time limit did they have? How did all that work? And as you probably all know the story, it was the Madison Amendment, which had been introduced 203 years before it was ratified in 1992. 203 years to ratify an amendment. And so immediately people began to question, well, why did the ERA have a deadline? There had been 4 amendments that had a deadline in the amendment, but it wasn't part of the Equal Rights Amendment. That's why when they did extend the deadline for 3 years, we didn't have to send it back to all the states to ratify. They didn't vote on a timeline. They only voted on the language of the amendment itself. So much education happened during those years, and people started to question, well, what if 3 more states ratified? I mean, why not? When Nevada ratified, I might have this wrong, I think it was 2017. And there were many states who were now trying this. And in our local chapter in Columbia, Harry Miller sent out a notice and said, would anybody be interested in working on getting Missouri ratified, and we could become one of the final states? And so a bunch of us met in Columbia and talked about it. And there were other chapters doing things, Kansas City, Springfield, groups of people doing things to promote passage of the amendment in Missouri. So we went to the Capitol. Terry Miller organized an event there with speakers. By then, Illinois had ratified, and a representative from Illinois came to the rotunda and talked about how they did what they did in Illinois. We had a couple of legislative days where we went through the hallways, and some of these were statewide events. Others of you may have been there. I told Terry about the tool that had been used in the first round in many states in the 70s. And she had some little green cards printed up with the text of the amendment on them, and we were handing them out in the hallways. And I just remember walking up to an aide, a young man who I asked him what he thought about the Equal Rights Amendment, and clearly he had not read it. So I offered him the card, and I said, actually, it's very simple, and this is the entire text. And he read it. He held the card and he read it with interest, and I could see his eyes focus on that card. And I said, well, is there a question I can answer? And he said, well, what do you think this means on account of sex? And I didn't want to guess which particular issue that's brewing out there, whatever it might be. And so I just went back to the basics, and I said, well, if there is a law that affects a right that's extended to one sex, no matter which it is, then that right must also be extended to the other sex. And he seemed okay with that, but I imagine after we left, there was lots of discussions. But it did make me realize too, that whatever this young man hears next about the arguments for and against the Equal Rights Amendment, he will have read it. He will already know if someone's claiming that the amendment contains this deep, dark statement, that it's simply not there. And that's part of the battle. Because we're not there yet. We're on the road to the ERA. President Biden did us a solid in announcing the Equal Rights Amendment, and that doesn't get us to the finish line. But none of the steps along the way have gotten us to the finish line alone. There were many boulders we had to work our way around, and many obstacles in the road. And in today's world, as we look forward, we have our 38 state ratifications. We've had them since Virginia ratified in January of 2020. But all of the lawsuits, and Alice talked about a document that went through the various lawsuits and perspectives. And this is really, and as with any amendment, this is how we will define what does the Equal Rights Amendment mean. Is it effective today? If someone comes forward with a case where their rights have been violated, can they claim that they're protected by the Equal Rights Amendment? Will that get them what they need in a court of law? So part of what we have to do is be supportive of people who are coming forward and using the Equal Rights Amendment, because this will create the stir and this will bring on the lawsuits. Well, what about the rescissions? Well, rescissions have never been recognized in the past. There's precedent that they should not be recognized. What about the timeline? What in the articles of the Constitution, Article 5 talks about how the Constitution may be amended. What says that you to have a timeline? It's obviously not necessary because of the Madison Amendment and 203 years. So going forward, we have to be mindful and supportive of the lawsuits. But I think it's also important when we hear an acquaintance or our friends talking about the Equal Rights Amendment, they may have misinterpretations. They may imagine a big, thick document with nooks and crannies of dangerous language. And we can help by asking if they've read the amendment. And when they read the amendment, it's a moment for them to decide, do I believe what people are telling me? Which voices do I believe? And what do I think when I read these words? What does it mean to me? And this is important because the Equal Rights Amendment is still going to be an issue going forward for years. I think this because it has been an issue just to get to this point where we can say the Equal Rights Amendment can come into play in this moment, but candidates going forward are going to state their positions on the Equal Rights Amendment. And when they do, the more people who know what the Equal Rights Amendment actually is, amidst all the swirling rumors and outright ridiculous theories, for people to know what it says will be helpful when they make up their minds and go to the voting booth. So I think on one hand, I want to celebrate where we are, and we've celebrated many times, and that's for real. We need to do that and keep doing that and keep focused on the prize and keep paying attention because we have a ways to go yet. So I thank you so much for listening to me, and I wish you all equality and joy.
Live room tonight, because I'm sure you got some applause in the Zoom room as well.
Thank you so much, Susan. I will stay for our Q&A after our next speaker. Uh-oh, I don't think she can hear me either. Because maybe we need to go back.
We can hear you now.
Okay, good. Okay, you can hear me okay? Thank you.
It's a little muffled, but yes.
Okay. I will speak from here. How is this? Better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'm sorry I'm not on camera, but I would like to switch the view so that the people in the live room, thank you. I know, so we'll let you go. Actually, Dave, I'm gonna have you give spotlight. And Alice, can you help me? How do I say Zakiya?
Yep,
Thank
that's
you.
right.
If you would, I would, yes. Did you hear me say thank you, Susan?
Yes, I did. And
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
thought she had.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. So we're gonna get you off spotlight. Thank you for sitting so patiently and looking so serene, which is not easy to do during these times. And we're gonna work out our tech and be better next time. So
I've enjoyed it.
we got you. Nope, we don't have you. I think when she starts speaking, we'll have, nope.
Yes. So,
There we go. Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you, Zakiya. Thank you. Okay, Zakiya Thomas is a dedicated, oh, I still need to read. Sorry. Thank you, Zakiya. We appreciate your patience and your good humor, everyone. Zakiya Thomas is a dedicated advocate for justice and equality. With a rich background in political strategy and nonprofit management, she leads a coalition of over 300 organizations representing 80 million people. Her work spans gender, racial, and reproductive justice, LGBTQ plus rights, and more, emphasizing the interconnectedness of these issues to foster collaboration. An adjunct professor at Georgetown Law, Zakiya teaches aspiring leaders how to run for political office and serves on several nonprofit boards, championing causes from reproductive rights to financial empowerment. Daily, Zakiya and her team strive to build support for the Equal Rights Amendment in Congress and across the nation. Thank you and welcome to Zakiya Thomas.
Well, thank you all so much for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. Again, I'm Zakiya Thomas, President and CEO of the ERA Coalition. We are a movement of movements. So our over 300 partner organizations represent many aspects of equality, all working together towards making equality a reality in this country through the Equal Rights Amendment. So as Susan mentioned, we have the Equal Rights Amendment. President Biden declared it as the law of the land on January 17th. And now it's up to us to make sure that we're implementing it and using it as a tool to to erase gender discrimination in our country. So what I want to talk about first is you've heard the path that we've got to. So it's been fully ratified. It was passed by both houses of Congress. And right now we're working to make sure that everyone in the country understands that we have the Equal Rights Amendment and that we can actually use it moving forward. And Susan mentioned some of the litigation that may be coming down the pipe. But the way we see it is we're focusing on 3 different aspects of moving the Equal Rights Amendment forward towards implementation. One is a public education campaign, making sure everyone across the country understands that we have the Equal Rights Amendment, that it protects against sex discrimination, and that we need to use it and support it so that if it's challenged in the Supreme Court at some point through these litigation efforts, that we then have protection against rescission or someone trying to take the Equal Rights Amendment away from us. 2 is a litigation strategy. So monitoring the litigation that is out in for the Equal Rights Amendment. A number of these cases will involve women's rights. Many will involve LGBTQ plus rights and specifically trans rights in particular. We've seen our trans community under direct attack from this administration. And the third part of our strategy is to work towards building support in Congress and in the state legislatures for the Equal Rights Amendment. We know that the ERA is overwhelmingly popular in this country. Over 80% of the country thinks we should have an Equal Rights Amendment in our Constitution, and they want to see it happen. So it's up to us to make sure that we do that. And so all of these efforts are to build support, to make sure people know we have this, know that we have to protect it, know that we can use it to protect ourselves against discrimination. So some of the things that you can help on the local level in particular, as Susan said, the first thing you need to do is show up. Talk to people about the Equal Rights Amendment. Talk in the groups that you're part of. So if you're part of NOW, if you're part of National Council of Jewish Women, if you're part of the YWCA, if you have a sewing group, if you have a book club, which we all call wine clubs, and other things, then talk about the Equal Rights Amendment in those rooms and let people know that we have it and that it's up to us to maintain our rights by protecting them and talking about them. We also need to make sure that we let our members of Congress know that we support the Equal Rights Amendment. You mentioned Josh Hawley. So Josh Hawley actually did 2 things last year. He voted against a piece of legislation that affirmed the Equal Rights Amendment as the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. And he spoke out against the Equal Rights Amendment in the first Senate Judiciary Committee hearing in 40 years. So we know that your senator does not like the Equal Rights Amendment, but it's up to you to talk to him and make sure he knows that you support it and that he should, if he wants to stay in office. And we're also launching a Correct the Constitution campaign, which is basically what it sounds like. We have all these constitutions out there that don't have the Equal Rights Amendment in them. So it's up to us to put it in there. And so we're having house parties across the country to get people to come together, talk about the Equal Rights Amendment, talk about the importance of the Equal Rights Amendment, and to correct those constitutions that they have, whether it's a stamp or an insert, to make sure people understand that, even though the National Archives has not published the 28th Amendment in the Constitution, it's there, and it's up to us to make sure that it stays there. Additionally, Missouri does not have a state-level Equal Rights Amendment. There are a number of states across the country who are introducing legislation in their state legislature to have a state-level Equal Rights Amendment. New York was the latest to pass such an amendment. I mean, theirs is the most expansive Equal Rights Amendment across the country. It covers ethnicity, disability, reproductive status across the board. And so it is a comprehensive way to protect people against discrimination. Additionally, there are state level ratification efforts for the federal ERA. We still have states that are trying to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment in their state so that they show that we have overwhelming support across this country for the Equal Rights Amendment, and they're doing their part to make sure that we have as many as possible states ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment to show that support, so that if there are issues going forward, then the people have spoken, and this is what we need to have done. One of the avenues that we're also looking at are state level litigation strategies. So for the states that have Equal Rights Amendment in their state already, bringing cases to that use the Equal Rights Amendment so that we can show that the Equal Rights Amendment can be used to support these issues, and building a base of case law so that when a case goes to the Supreme Court, there is some case law and precedent that the Supreme Court can use to assess whether or not cases do meet the criteria for the Equal Rights Amendment. So those are just a few of the things that we can do on the local level, on the state level, and federally in order to ensure that we have the Equal Rights Amendment. But the biggest thing, and if you take nothing else away from this, is we have to talk to people about the Equal Rights Amendment. You'd be surprised how people respond if you say, well, did you know that we have an Equal Rights Amendment, but we don't actually recognize it? And their eyes will lit, because everyone assumes that we have this right that's in place. But until we can actually implement it, it's not going to be as helpful to us as it should be. And so that's our job, is to make sure it's implemented going forward. So with that, there are resources that you can use. So speaking with your local community groups, working with the ERA Coalition, you can visit us at eracoalition.org, and you can follow us on social media. But there are chapters across the country and across Missouri that you can be a part of in order to uplift the Equal Rights Amendment. And it's really on us right now. Congress has done their job. The people have spoken, and now it's up to us to make sure that people implement the Equal Rights Amendment. So with that, I can open it up to questions if you wanted to go into Q&A now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was very interesting. And I'm going to take the liberty. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. I know we have people from all over the state, and my name's Ann Calvert. I'm the president of the league here in Kansas City. So I'm gonna just pull rank and ask the first question, which is, you mentioned that there were house parties that you're doing all across the country. If somebody was interested in hosting one of those house parties, do you have the materials? Is it a sort of turnkey operation?
It's a house party in a box. So if you reach out to us, we'll provide the material that you need in order to have the party, and give you instructions on how to actually bring people together and what you should focus on in the conversation and talking points.
Okay, and how many people are generally, like, what do you recommend for the number of people to attend one of those house parties?
So I would say it depends on the size of the group and how much people already know about the Equal Rights Amendment. So if people don't know much, it's probably easier to have a smaller group to actually talk about the intricacies of what it is and how to get people involved and engaged. But you could have up to 20, 30 people in a room, depending on the size of where you're hosting it, and just have people come in and start talking about the Constitution, talk about the Equal Rights Amendment, and the steps we need to take to make it happen.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, do we have any questions in the real room? I shouldn't say real, in the live room? Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. So the question was. Okay, so the question was, and I'm going to turn this back to gallery view so that you don't have to feel too self-conscious, and I didn't realize I was on camera. Okay, so the question was, could we read the Equal Rights Amendment? And yes, I think that's a great idea. It reads, Section 1, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Section 2, the Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. Section 3, the amendment shall take effect 2 years after the date of ratification. All right, and we have another question. So the question is, when is that 2 years up?
So the 2 years is already up. So when Virginia ratified in 2020, that set off the 2-year marker. So as of 2022, we should have had the Equal Rights Amendment beginning to be implemented in the country. So it's 2 years overdue for us to start the implementation process.
If Missouri and Arizona have ratified it, was it ratified? How many 2 years past?
Okay, so the question is, if Missouri and Arizona have not ratified it, how did it get ratified? And then how then are we 2 years past due? Did I say that correctly?
So Susan, I don't know if you want to talk about that because you did talk about the ratifications in Illinois and in Virginia. I can take it if you don't want to.
Go ahead, you're doing a great job.
So Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia were the last 3 states. So I'm in Virginia, so you're welcome, America, for the Equal Rights Amendment. We're the last 3 states to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And so as soon as Virginia's General Assembly ratified, excuse me, that kicked off the 2-year marker for implementation to start 2 years after that. Why it hasn't happened is because the Trump administration in 2020, their Department of Justice, Office of Legal Counsel, issued a memo saying the Equal Rights Amendment has passed the deadline or the timeline in which it should have been ratified, and so it's not an amendment to the Constitution. So the archivist shouldn't publish it. Well, that's not true. The truth is, it's met all the requirements to be part of the Constitution, and as Susan mentioned, the states didn't vote on whether or not there was a timeline. The timeline was added after it was passed in Congress the first time. And so, or after it was passed in Congress. And so that deadline should not be applicable, which is why we've been working with Congress and others to affirm that the Equal Rights Amendment has met all the criteria it needs to. It is part of the Constitution, whether or not the archivist publishes. It is law because it has met all the requirements. And so now we need to have champions. We need a president. We need a Congress that will actually affirm that it's there. We have a president who affirmed it. That was Biden on January 17th. But now we need to make sure that every branch of government understands we have the Equal Rights Amendment and that we can use it as the tool. So Stacey, to your question, the amendment is there. But the politics and money are keeping us from having it implemented. We know that money is the root of all politics, right? And so there are people who benefit from the status quo, and they don't want to have an Equal Rights Amendment because what if you're a school and you have to enforce Title IX? What if you're a business and you have to enforce Title VII requires equal pay? If you don't have to do those things and you can get away with it now without an Equal Rights Amendment, what incentive do you have to have an Equal Rights Amendment? And what incentive do you have to fund candidates who support your position? So if you follow the money to some of these organizations that are anti-equality, you'll find it going to some of these champions in Congress who are anti-equality champions. Like they want to keep the status quo because it's in their best interest and because they're getting money from people who support discrimination because it benefits them financially. So it should be implemented. It's up to us to make sure it is, and it's up to us to make sure that we elect people who support our interests and what we believe is right. And in this case, it's the Equal Rights Amendment. And so we are a nonpartisan organization. So you won't hear me talk about Republican versus Democrat. We talk about equality champions. And anyone who supports the Equal Rights Amendment in our eyes is an equality champion. And we need to support those people and bring more of them to our legislatures to make sure that we have people in places that will make the right decisions for us when the time comes for them to make votes on legislation.
Thank you. We've got some questions here in the live room, and we've got a question in the Zoom room. I'm gonna go to the Zoom room. Stacy, if you'd like to unmute and ask your question in just 1 second, but I'm gonna tell the live room people that head on up here and ask your question so the Zoom room people can hear. So if you can line up right next to me while Stacy's asking her question, thank you.
Yeah,
All right,
and
Stacey.
actually, she just answered it a minute ago.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right, great, thank you. All right, we have a couple people coming up from the live room to ask.
By working on the Equal Rights Amendment, are we taking on this administration's position against DEI?
Yes. So diversity, equity, inclusion includes everyone. And some of the biggest beneficiaries of DEI are white women, to be quite frank. A lot of programs that were put in place for DEI aren't just for what you would consider people of color or for people of certain demographics, like the white women have benefited the most. So when we look at DEI initiatives, women benefit, and people of who are marginalized in marginalized communities benefit from them. And so, yes, we are talking about DEI is an important concept in our country because it's not about quotas, which some people like you to think it's about. It's about making sure that that the places of power, that our schools, that other places represent reflect the diversity of our country. Because when you don't have diversity and you have a single mindset going, that doesn't benefit the larger community because it reinforces negative biases. So being able to see people in positions where they have positions of power, they have positions of influence, and they have the opportunity to show that, we're just like everybody else, that is helpful. And so taking on DEI is important because a lot of these programs discriminate on the basis of sex, quite frankly. And when you have the Equal Rights Amendment, it doesn't mean you can't help one community over another. It just makes sure that you can't discriminate from one community to the other. So it's not about keeping some people down. It's about bringing everybody up to the same level.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for the work you're doing. I'm kind of confused about what the opposition, beyond deadlines and technicalities and that sort of thing. What are the talking points about from people who say we shouldn't have such an amendment? What's the gist of their arguments?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, right? You would think everyone would be okay with everyone should be treated equally and men and women have equal rights. It's pretty simple, right? It should not be political. But what you'll see is right now there are two main arguments that the opposition are making, and they're similar to the arguments they made back in the 70s. In the 70s, it was, oh, well, you'll have gay rights will be a thing. Like you'll have men in women's bathrooms. You'll have women in combat positions or being drafted into the army and going into combat positions. We've had women in combat positions, and it's actually helped them advance their careers in the military, right? We have same-sex and unisex bathrooms, and the world did not collapse. So right now, the big issues that they're trying to use are abortion on demand. So if you have an equal rights amendment, that means abortion on demand. That's not what it means. What it means is you cannot be denied abortion, but there might still be able to have some guidelines on it, just like you have with many medical procedures. So abortion on demand has never been a thing in the context that they're trying to use it for. And the other is the trans community. Less than 2% of our country identify as transgender. But for some reason, this administration and these anti-equality individuals are so focused on getting us to divided about the transgender community and trying to alienate them that's really what they're focusing on. That was the biggest push against the New York Equal Rights Amendment, saying it's parents' choice. Parents shouldn't have to have their kids taught about transgender issues in class, or parents should be able to decide whether or not children are able to have gender-affirming care. And the truth is, a parent should have that right, but that right should not be overrun by a state, and the state shouldn't have that influence to tell you whether or not that's the case. And that's really what it boils down to, is educating people and informing them about what is actually true, and to dispel some of those myths and that fear, because they're not based in reality. They're based in keeping people uninformed so that they'll make decisions that are against the community's larger interests and alienated the community in the process. My thing is, when you start discriminating against people because of who they are, that's a red flag. We did it with racism, we've done it with gender, and now we can't continue to do it with other communities in our society.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks very much for the work that you're doing. Your website is terrific, the ERA Coalition. Only on the Hill, it says that the that we have Ayanna Pressley and Cori Bush as the two champions. And unfortunately, we all know that Cori Bush did not get reelected. So
Right.
One of the things I think is really important to do is to let people we know who are fighting so hard for the things we believe in either branch of Congress, let them know, give them an attaboy or an attagirl that we appreciate what you're doing. So who's working with Ayanna Pressley now?
So we're still trying to identify who Ayanna Pressley's co-lead will be on that.
Okay.
I'm partial because Jennifer McClellan was one of the main forces behind the Virginia Equal Rights Amendment, or Virginia's ratification of the ERA. And so now that she's a congresswoman, I would love if she would step up in some leadership role in that capacity, even though she's just a sophomore this year. But we're working with Ayanna Pressley's office, and I actually had an event with them on Thursday where I got a chance to speak with the congresswoman about what next steps are. But in the Senate, it looks as though Senator Murkowski from Alaska, who is a Republican, is going to be the lead, which is fantastic to have a Republican lead on congressional legislation for the Equal Rights Amendment. And Senator Hirono from Hawaii, it looks like she's going to be the co-lead on that. So as we know more about who is going to step up and take on those leadership roles, we do know over the next 2 years it's going to be really tough to pass legislation in the House and in the Senate. So we're building support among Republicans as well as Democrats and independents, because we know we need everybody on this so that when we can take control, when equality champions take control of the House and Senate again, we have that support across all lines to make sure that we can advance legislation.
Okay, we don't have them in writing.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. All right, we have another question.
Thanks to everybody for the wonderful presentation. I'm curious about the role of the judiciary in this effort, whether they, of course, have been involved to date or what potentially court cases could look like.
So to date, the most major legislation was brought by the three state attorneys general who ratified the Equal Rights Amendments, the final 3 states. And that made it all the way up to the appellate court in DC, on the Third Circuit in DC. What the court came back said that there was no standing because the 3 states said that, well, because the Trump administration did not implement the Equal Rights Amendment, they had a case, and they said that this case should force the Trump administration to do that. That wasn't the case. So what happened is the judiciary punted it back to Congress. Biden's administration, before he declared the ERA as the law of the land, punted it back to the Congress as well, saying Congress can act to remove the timeline and that would be it. Right now, we know there's a sense that the judicial branch of government is not friendly to equality cases. Let's just put it mildly. I mean, we saw that with the Dobbs decision. And so we haven't really had much litigation to date for the Equal Rights Amendment, but now that Biden has declared the law of the land, and now that there are so many attacks on our communities, we're likely to see more challenges come through. We're hoping that they come through in positive ways for us. It could come either from people on the opposition side who want to strike down the ERA, and it can come from people on the support side who want to affirm and uplift the ERA. We're tracking those. We are not a litigation firm at the coalition, so what we do is work with partners who are identifying this legislation and keeping informed and helping to have those conversations as things move through. So right now, I'm not aware of any legislation. Doesn't mean there's not any out there, but we are keeping track to find what those cases are coming through so that we can make sure we're on top of it.
As everyone has said, thank you very much. I'm just well, not confused, but astounded that the archivist has so much power, that the one reason we can't seem to get this thing over the board is that the archivist refuses to publish it. And I'm just wondering, why is that? I mean, why is the archivist the kind of fuzzy link in the whole thing?
So if you saw the news as of last night, she doesn't have a job anymore. So when Senator Rubio took over.
Well, that's one way of solving it. Just eliminate the job. Hey, good thinking. Yes, I love that.
So President Trump said before Biden left office that he was going to fire the archivist because you know that the files that were taken to Mar-a-Lago from the archives. So he had it out for the previous. It wasn't even this archivist; it was the previous archivist. And so he said he was going to.
Oh well, okay, that explains. Yeah.
So, but it really comes down to they don't have that much power. Most of the amendments were actually implemented before we had an archivist. The archivist's job is really just to tell the states that we have this thing, publish in the Constitution, tell the states that we have this amendment. But we didn't have that for the first 15 or 20 amendments to begin with. And so since Biden declared it the law of the land, federal recognition that we have the Equal Rights Amendment, that's it. Having it published in the Constitution is a technicality. And so that's really what we think people are going to lay their arguments on against the Equal Rights Amendment is this technicality, just like they do with the deadline. It's a technicality. It's not real, but they're making it into something because they want to use that argument. And it's easy for people to digest that, not understanding there's much more complicated than that. So the archivist doesn't need to publish. We'd love for them to publish, whomever it is. I'm assuming it'll be a man just because of this administration. We'd love for them to publish, but they don't have to do that in order for it to be recognized as part of the Constitution.
Okay, are there any questions from the Zoom room? You you want to raise your hand, you can unmute. Okay, we may be out of questions. You've given us so much information. Anybody else here? Okay, I do have one last question, and this is for Susan. So Zakiya said, or maybe Susan, you said, one of you said that there is no organization here in the state of Missouri that's working on this effort. I know that there are people here working on it. Certainly you are, Susan. But why is there no, am I right that you had said there is no effort in Missouri, or there is no, Zakiya, I think you said that?
Yeah, I don't remember saying that. What did I say?
So I
Okay.
think we do have folks in Missouri. I'm actually like checking our website right now. So because we have a number of like now chapters, like women voters chapters and others who are working on the ERA, but it's not specific. That's not the only thing they're working on. So there might be organizations that are doing it, but they're not like ERA. We don't have chapters for our coalition. It's just whomever wants to join is part of the coalition. And it's just we're not a membership organization. You just join and because you want to uplift the ERA. So we probably do have chapters that are in Missouri for other national organizations, National Council of Jewish Women, YWCA. So there may not be an ERA specific one, but there are folks I'm sure in Missouri who are working on the Equal Rights Amendment.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I goofed that up. So Susan, do you know if the League of Women Voters Missouri is part of the coalition?
A formal part of Zakiya's coalition. That I don't know. I think that we are joining with anyone who wants to work on the ERA. Similar, I guess I think of it more similar to Indiana. There was not a formal structure or membership. It was through communications that we were all communicating with each other all the time. And so I'm not sure how to answer your question. I know I'm not aware of a formal link, but I read Zakiya's emails all the time and stay up to date. I think probably many people are following her.
Okay.
So I actually
great.
just Googled it, and you do have a Project 28 in Missouri.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Working to
Okay.
ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. I'm not sure how
Springfield.
active they are, but
They were very active when we were going to the Capitol in Jefferson City, trying to get Missouri to be ratified as one of the final states. And I may be wrong about this. They're either out of I think they're out of Springfield, unless someone knows differently.
There's,
So
no, it looks like
I will
they're
say,
active even
Yeah.
as of recently. So that's interesting. Go ahead. Sorry.
that's okay. Marilyn?
A few years ago, we talked about joining this coalition, but it actually was partisan. They were telling people how to vote, who to vote for. So it kind of kept us out of it because of that. You know, we have such a firm stance on that. I would assume that to put it in the Constitution to recognize this, is that correct? If we had to put it in the Missouri Constitution, it would require a ballot issue. And it would either have to be proposed by the legislature or by a citizen initiative. So we have the ability to do a citizen initiative, but we know how difficult that is, having just come through the Amendment 3 on reproductive rights, and the legislature is trying to reverse it a couple months after it was just approved by the people. So I don't mean to sound negative. Obviously, it would be great to have this in our Constitution, but we would be covered by the US Constitution, correct?
Right.
Yep, you would be covered by the federal one. And Marilyn, to your point, we stress our nonpartisanship, especially as of late. We have, for instance, the Republican lead for the Illinois state ERA ratification effort is on our board, and he's our treasurer. So we understand and appreciate that it's not about one party or the other. One party is better on the issue than the other, but we want anyone who supports equality to be part of this. And so we're actually lobbying and actively trying to get Republican support and independent support, because it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's an issue for everyone. And so we want people to understand that we're nonpartisan, but we do tell the truth about who's doing what. But we can't tell you who to vote for. But we can tell you these are the people who stand up for the things that we stand up for.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you for all that information from everybody. Thank you. Okay, last call for questions. Okay, all right. So thank you so much to our guests. I do want to, I know, yeah, yep, we're getting all kinds of applause here. And I don't think you could hear too, Zakiya, when you were talking, that there was a lot of laughter because you were you're also funny as you presented. So I don't think you could hear it always. So I wanted to tell you that. You got a lot
Well,
of
good. I'm glad
laughter.
people enjoyed it. Thank you. And thank you for having me. And thank you for the work. I'm so glad that you brought this issue up, and Susan and Alice for sharing all the history here. But like, this is important and it's up to us to do it, because if we don't, who will? So thank you.
It is, yeah. Thank you, thank you. And you're welcome to stay on. We do a little bit of our committee chair shout outs and a little bit of I'm gonna a little pep talk, because I think we all need a little pep talk right now. So
I'm actually going to go
welcome
grab
to stay
some
on.
lunch, but thank you all so much. Take care.
Thank you so much. Fair.
Goodbye, everyone.
Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. This was a tremendous turnout. Before I turn it over to the chairs to call out for volunteers and let them know what's going on, I just want to say this is a really difficult time. There are attacks on democracy, and our work has never been more important. Our fight has never been more uphill. But what I want to tell everyone is that we need to resist succumbing to the chaos. The chaos is part of the plan. And if we, in these attacks on democracy, and so we need to be very careful that in our interactions with other people, that we remember that every single person we talk to is a potential ally. Even if they are on the other side of us ideologically, they are a potential ally. And so we don't ever want to insult or I mean, if there is a policy that harms someone that we think voted for a candidate we don't support, we don't want to rejoice in that, because that person is a potential ally. That person might come to our side and might understand how important democracy is to our everyday lives. And so I also want to be very careful that we don't dehumanize in any way the people who are on the other side of us ideologically and who might have supported. Now, I'm not talking about the actual leaders attacking our democracy. I'm talking about the people who voted for them. We have to be so careful that we don't speak in any way that's dehumanizing, because dehumanization opens the door to atrocity, and we can't go there. So thank you everyone for the work that you do. Most of the work, as you know, happens in our committees. So if I have any committee chairs who want to do a shout out, if they need some help, I'm going to let them come up here or unmute and let you know what they need. And I've got some hands up, so I'm going to get them to come here so that they can talk. Anybody in the Zoom room, if you raise your hand, you have to raise your actual computer hand, or I can't tell, which is not your actual computer hand. That would be your computer hand. So Karine, I'll let you go first if you don't mind unmuting.
Okay. Hi, everybody. This is a shout out to get out the vote, and also a shout out for the membership committee and voter registration committee. We have these working meetings that are will be posted on the not the calendar, but the volunteer page on our website. And anybody is welcome to come to those. You don't have to have had the DEI training to do these. These are held in a member's home, and we will do behind the scenes work to get stuff ready for these committees. So we make the buttons or the pins that we hand out. We highlight the voter registration cards, staple the Vote for One cards to them, and other things that come up that we need help with. So there's going to be one coming up real soon in Lee Summit, and that will be posted. I'll try and post that by Monday. So it probably will be, it could be any day of the week. So just a heads up about those meetings.
Okay, thank you very much. And for everybody here and on the Zoom room, you can find those under the volunteer tab if you're local on our website. And I'm going to tell you, we have a line of like 6 people. So thank you, Kari, for setting the tone and keeping it short.
I will keep it short. We have a mix and mingle after this. Go right up Grand Street. It's a 2-minute drive to the new City Barrel. And they are thrilled to have us. In fact, I thought we were going to be in the upstairs room, and they're like, oh no, we want you all in our lovely heated patio. So please come. And some of you who are maybe sitting at home, getting your cars, come on down. We have signed some new members who will come. By the way, Georgiana Buchanan is one of our newest members and is here. We had 8 people join our league in January alone. So we are still getting people joining all the time who would love to help advance our nonpartisan work and speak up. And when Ann talks about, remember, these are attacks on democracy. They're not attacks on one party or another. They're attacks on democracy. And that's a really great way for our nonpartisan organization to frame it and have good conversations.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll go to the Zoom room. Harry.
I don't know if anybody's there from Forum. Is there somebody in the line?
Yes, she's in line.
Okay,
right.
then I will just talk about Observer Corps.
Okay.
And we have a group of people that observe different government entities, school boards, library boards, our Kansas City, Missouri City Council, all kinds of things, and follow what's going on. And if you'd like to join, we a lot of it you can do from home, just watch on Zoom, and it just helps us to have many eyes keeping the government, knowing that we're watching. And we've developed some great relationships with all of our election boards. So we'd love to have you join us.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Kelly Edmondson, new voter registration chair as of January. And I just wanted to give a plug again for anyone that wants to do voter registration to sign up for the February session of DEI nonpartisan training. And even if you took it in the past, which I did, I think a refresher is a good thing, especially in the current climate. There may be some new points that we need to learn, and I just think getting refreshed on it would be good. You have to be logged into the league website and then go to the calendar, and it's on February 24th. And from there you can click and register, and I just checked, there's still 15 spots. So I hope to see you there if you want to do voter registration with me. Thank you.
Anyway, one sec. We've got some chat in the live room. We'll wait just 1 sec. Okay. Great.
Talking about forums for the April 6th election, we have 6 forums planned, 5 school district forums, and 1 for the Raytown Alderman race. Send your questions in on the question line on the league's website. They can be about your school district, or if you live in Raytown, about the election there, or they can be general school district or school related questions, because Jefferson City is creating a lot of things, charter schools and one thing and another, that are not equal opportunity situations. Watch the forums. Just because you can't vote in that district doesn't mean you can't learn something by watching the caliber of the candidates who are representing the districts. And that's very unfortunate. I'd be interested in anybody who has connections with high school social studies teachers, because we'd like to encourage high school students to send in questions. And we also
we've got some groups that are going to do forum watch parties. So that's a good idea with your neighborhood friends. You can call it a book group watch party, serve wine.
A wine
whatever.
group.
Yes. And we're always looking for new members, especially tech savvy new members, because we do our forums over Zoom and our meetings over Zoom. And we don't want to run our tech people ragged. So we welcome everyone, but if you're tech savvy, we appreciate you a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Darr. I'm the head of the nominating committee. Every year, part of our board of directors changes with new volunteers to serve as directors. But this year we have a very big year because 2 of the members of the executive committee, the president, who's standing really close to me right here, and the secretary are stepping back. And so we are looking for people to fill those positions as well as positions on the board itself. And we would love to have volunteers. If you can contact me or one of the other 2 members of my committee, or if you see us coming, don't look away.
And there is I've created a document. I don't know if Cindy's done this as well, but yeah, everybody sees how much work there is to do. And I think I worry that nobody's going to want to jump in and be president. But I've actually created a document that's titled something like all the things that are super cool about being the president of the League of Women Voters. The first thing on that list is the face that people make when they hear that I'm the president of the League of Women Voters, because they go, and yeah, that is super cool. So there's like, it's got a dozen things on that list. So don't be intimidated. It's really the most meaningful thing I've ever done in my work life. So all right, Peg, a former president who knows.
Thanks. My name's Peg Prendergast, and I am co-chair with Pat Goodwin, who's also in the room here today, of the Vote 411 committee.